welcome to Good Game Pocket Edition, the show for time-deficient gamers by gamers. I'm Hex.
And I'm Barjo. And Hex, I think it's safe to say that I should never be put in charge of any sort of important city planning because I rendered thousands of Sim citizens homeless this week in SimCity.
That full review at the end of the show. But a few other games have chewed through our daylight hours this week, so let's start with the biggie, God of War Ascension. The grim-faced Kratos is back once more, though this time in an adventure set before the events of the first game. Ascension explores Kratos' evolution from human to the ghost of Sparta as we know him today. He's still a pretty manly man though, with just as many devastating combat moves, and one or two new abilities such as the power to slow time and slide spectacularly down walls.
This is big blockbuster stuff, and Hex, I was actually feeling a bit fatigued from God of War until I sat down and played it again. I was like, oh yeah, that's right, God of War is like this. It's awesome. And it's such a good looking game. They constantly present you with these giant set pieces that you just get to stare and drool at.
And they've tweaked the combat system in a few interesting ways to keep it feeling fresh as well. If there's one word to describe this game, it's slick. I did struggle a little bit with the level design though. There were a few occasions where I just wasn't sure where to go, and I felt like Kratos knew where to go but I didn't, so that got a bit frustrating. They have introduced multiplayer this time, which a lot of people were surprised at. So what did you think of the multiplayer, Barjo?
Well, I was a bit apprehensive at first because this is completely a single player game, and adding this on felt like, why are they doing this? But they fleshed it out. You can really work your class the way you want it. I think it's good enough not to be dismissed and worth a look at.
Good work,
But even if the multiplayer isn't your thing, the single player is still at that God of War standard that we've come to expect.
Yeah, I had a great time with this game, Hex. I gave it 9 out of 10.
I gave it 8. Now, for something completely different, a game we reviewed over on Spawn Point, Bit Trip Runner 2. Actually, the official name of this sequel is Bit Trip Presents Runner 2 Future Legend of Rhythm Alien, but we're just going to call it Runner 2. This is a little bit like an endless runner, although there's an aim here to reach the finish line with a good score. Your little man, Commander Video, runs automatically. You'll be slide kicking, jumping and boss battling your way through a series of amazing looking levels, doing your best to avoid all the crazy obstacles and grab the gold.
I love the energetic beat to this game. It gets you into the rhythm of that platforming, which starts off quite easy and then gets more challenging as you progress.
There's a point in this game where you just kind of zone out and your reflexes take over and you're not really processing the moves that are required. And I love that the voice of Mario, Charles Martinet, was enlisted for some narration.
Our hero ponders his current position.
Here we go! It's rare to play a game with quite as much style as this. It's an overload of amazing, retro-inspired video game art and sound. I loved this. I gave it 9.5.
And there's nothing quite like beating your friend's best score. So I gave it 9 out of 10.
Right, time to hit the Ask Good Game desk, Barjo. All right, question time, and we've got this one from Ewan, who is in Melbourne, Victoria. Hey, Barjo and Hex, I just wanted to know if there will be a Star Wars Battlefront 3, and if there is, do you know when it's going to come out? Thanks.
Well, Ewan, that's a good question, but sadly all we can say is that no one knows for sure at this point. We do know it was in production and there was loads of leaked footage showing it was almost complete, but it was cancelled before it was ever even announced.
There is still hope though. Someone actually found a listing and cover art for a game called Star Wars First Assault, which according to the interwebs was going to be a team-based shooter released later this year. And apparently it's meant to be a kind of precursor to Battlefront 3, so if it sells well, then technically Battlefront 3 should go ahead.
But since Disney bought out LucasArts, there's been murmurings that pretty much all games have been put on hold as they focus on creating the new films and games to tie in with them. So that game may never actually be released, and apparently even Star Wars 1313 is being rejigged to tie in with some of the films.
But that's all just rumours though. So long story short, no one knows what the situation is. Sorry. But there is a decent chance that we'll get Battlefront 3 game someday, maybe.
Right, well, I think it's time we reached into the mixed bag of public opinion. That's right, it's time for You Review.
And this week, seeing as we gave our first double 10 score for the year to Tomb Raider, it's only fair to hear your thoughts. And it seems like most of you agree. Donkey Kong had this to say. Brought, played, completed, no time to 100%, even though I brought it for the GF, lol. And gave it 10 out of 10. Glad you enjoyed it, Donkey Kong, but make sure you share.
Hyperactive simply said, crying because perfect. 10 out of 10. Well, Hyperactive, it certainly is an emotional journey of a game. And Flying Cable _98 shared his thoughts, saying, haven't played it yet, but is amazing. 10 out of 10. An astute observation, Flying Cable, but no doubt you'll find it even more amazing once you actually play it.
Not everyone agreed it was so amazing. However, Eric Nielsen had this to say. Not too good, 2.5 stars. Certainly some harsh critique, Eric. And It's Just Luke shared his thoughts saying, meh, 50-50. 5.5 stars.
Don't talk like that.
Well, sounds like a bit of a lukewarm response there. Luke.
And finally, Panther _Phoenix was very unimpressed and had a few choice words to say.
Mayday, Mayday, this is Lara Croft.
It only gets half a star because I can't rate it none. From second one, this is by far the worst reboot ever. This is supposed to be Tomb Raider. If I wanted to play Uncharted, I would have played that instead. And to all of you who loved it, go back and play it again, except assume it's called The Lost Island. And when you hear Lara, change it to Lana. You will absolutely find that if it had been called anything else, it would not ever be compared to a Tomb Raider game. It's just not. Half a star.
I don't think I'm that kind of Croft.
Well, Panther, it certainly didn't raid your tomb, from the sounds of it.
Oh, well, you can't please everyone, can you? But that's it for today, so back to the studio. What if I didn't want to buy the potion?
Good game.
Well, SimCity has come a long way since its original incarnation in 1989, and while it has branched off to things like SimCity Societies and Sim Safari, nothing quite beats the original enduring glee of endless hours of city planning.
The game certainly looks slick, and while a lot feels familiar, there are a few changes to the core gameplay that differ from the city builder that I remember. And times certainly are a-changin' when you have to be constantly online to play a game. I mean, I understand the need for DRM, but because of SimCity's shaky launch, it left a lot of players unable to connect to servers, causing some pretty intense frustration. It rendered the game unplayable for some.
We actually didn't have that much of an issue. It seems most of the connectivity issues we had were the player-to-player stuff. That is, in this installment of the franchise, you're able to choose from a handful of pre-created terrain options, which provide a varying number of set locations for players to claim. You can inhabit these terrains with friends, or join an existing map filled with other random players already building away, and stake a spot next to them. You make your choice based on what natural resources the land has to offer, which you will hopefully profit from in the future.
This system is in place so that you can set up trade negotiations with your neighbours, offer them money, services, or get them to help you out with things like water supply or garbage collection if you're in a bind. That said though, there's also something about this that feels quite restrictive. Here, you're given your little square of land and your dotted line that you have to stay within the boundaries of, and that's it.
Yeah, but happily the city building stays true to its roots. You begin by zoning residential, commercial, and industrial areas for your Sims to build it, connect them with roads, and then make sure they all have access to both water and power. As more and more Sims start to build in your city, you'll need to provide them with a seemingly endless supply of city services like public transport, hospitals, schools, and so on.
That said, prioritising is really hard.
Factories are constantly being abandoned because not enough university-educated workers are available to run them. But being able to afford a university is no easy task when there are so many basic city services like police and an ambulance that require constant upgrades and expansion. And just when I think I've saved up enough money, bam, power outage. I now need to spend all my savings on upgrades to my power plant or nothing will have power and everything will shut down.
It's mental, isn't it? It never ends, and suddenly it's 4 in the morning and I'm so far in debt there's just no coming out of it. I mean, you can accept bonds to temporarily bail yourself out, but I did that 3 times and I spent it all. The only choice I had left was to raise taxes by a lot. My Sims then hated me and all moved out. I knew then, Barjo, that it was over.
Yes, then the only course of action left to you is to unleash the lizard. Although really the trick to raking in the cash is focusing on new city specializations. So you can set up towns to be great big dirty mining cities or your own little Las Vegas. And it's pretty satisfying setting up a tourist city and watching thousands of people flood in from the region to see a rock show.
For me, SimCity always felt like a really solo game, and having to always be online to play this just feels a bit dumb.
Yeah, but in Max's defense, this game couldn't be what it is without that online component because a lot of the simulation actually takes place in the cloud.
Yeah, you know, I kind of assumed that it was just for DRM, but when I saw how much was being simulated at once, I'd be inclined to believe that. I just don't think they've sold the idea of this game very well, because that's an exciting concept, having so much cloud simulation.
There is a lot of good here, though. There are a lot of positives. Lots of stat-driven, colour-coded maps to pore over if you want to get into the nitty-gritty of your city's overview. And the interface, for the most part, is well thought out. The suggestions and hints from your various departments generally are quite clear in the way they guide you towards the best course of action to solve an issue. With an online game, it is unfair to judge it completely on its launch week, so I'm going to put launch issues aside and give it 7.5. I had a great time.
Yeah, I mean, it's upsetting because I could feel my friends' frustration as I saw them constantly signing in and out, just trying to maintain a stable connection. You know, for some, it was more than a train wreck. It was a giant angry lizard of destruction. But when I was online and playing, I had a ball, so I'm giving it 7.
Good game.
Well, that's it for your weekly roundup of gaming goodness here on Pocket Edition. But we have a brand new episode of Good Game this Tuesday, 8:30 p.m. on ABC2, where we have a look at the much anticipated BioShock Infinite.
Yes, it's been a long time in the making, that one. Let's hope it delivers on its steampunk Air City Skyhook goodness. Until then, may all your games be good ones. Hex out.
Barjo out.